And I got up in front of the jury. And the first thing I said is, I know my client's not likable. I don't particularly care for him. And I'm sure that some of you, maybe all of you, don't care for him either. But this is not a popularity contest. And you don't decide cases based upon whether you like someone or you don't. You base cases on your oath to follow the law, the evidence that the judge instructs you on. And when you do that, he wins this case. He has proven this case.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys at the top of their game in order to help you navigate the various ins and outs of the legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by William Ricigliano, who's a wonderful Italian name, and he is with RF Injury Law over there in New York and New Jersey. William, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Justin. How are you?
I am doing all right as well. Other than we had one of our little one came home sick, so she's
Uh,
hopefully everything will be fine there. I think my wife is home and taking care of her, but if all of a sudden everything explodes behind me, I'll let you know.
yeah.
So before we start, let's jump over and take a look at Williams Law Firm. This is rfinjurylaw.com. They are in New York and New Jersey. They're a full service personal injury team working out of New Jersey and New York City. And they basically focus on all of the areas that you need. You can reach them at 212-725-5755, or of course, visit them online at rfinjurylaw.com. As always, we will have a link in the description down below. So please, if you are interested in speaking with them, please do. And I will say, I noticed earlier on they have something, we'll talk about this, called the Lawmobile, and I legitimately laughed when I saw the commercial. So it's worth your time. It's everything you'd expect from an injury law commercial. So I liked it a lot. Before we get started, let's take a look at our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is Habanero Social. What if Google could send you free clients every single month? With Habanero Social, it's not a fantasy, it's reality. Their AI-powered platform optimizes your Google business profile to attract more local customers effortlessly. From cranking out high-quality content to managing reviews and fine-tuning your local SEO, Habanero Social handles all while you sit back and watch your business grow. 85% of local searches happen within the Google Maps pack. That's the place you need to be in order to capture those clients. An optimized Google business profile doesn't just show up, it engages and builds trust. It increases clicks and phone calls and ultimately boosts your business. And so we're confident. I'm sorry, Habanero Social is confident. They're so confident that they'll work with you and you'll see success that they offer a 3 times ROI guarantee, meaning you will make more than 3 times what you spend with them, or they'll pay you back or make it right. Stop wasting time on old school tactics. Visit Habanero Social to automate everything you need to rank higher, engage better, and drive more customers to your business. Ready to get more clients without lifting a finger? Visit habanerosocial.com and let the AI do the heavy lifting. And the second sponsor is Andropology. Gentlemen, if you're looking to take charge of your health, feel your best, listen up. Whether it's managing type 2 diabetes, boosting your testosterone levels later in life, or just wanting to increase your overall longevity, Andropology has got you covered. They deep dive into natural solutions, from superfoods like spirulina and tart cherry extract to targeted fitness routines like high intensity interval training, or HIIT, that can help you reclaim your energy and vitality. At Andropology, it's all about practical science-based advice tailored specifically for men who want to improve their health without the fluff. Think of it as your go-to guide for navigating the complexities of men's health simplified. From diet tips to supplement recommendations, they have everything you need to start making a positive change today. Visit andropology.com to explore the latest insights on living healthier and a more vibrant life. That's andropology.com, where better health for men begins. All right, and let me get a hold of my Zoom here and we will jump back over. All right, so again, I am joined with William Ricigliano. William is the founder and managing partner of RF Injury Law. He is the R in RF. And his partner also has, if I recall, a wonderful Italian sounding name. So it's a very, very Italian, Italian law firm. He has been a prominent personal injury attorney since 2001, securing multiple seven-figure verdicts and settlements across New York and New Jersey. After being admitted to the New Jersey State Bar in 1994 and the New York Bar in 1995, Mr. Ricigliano has quickly earned a reputation for his courtroom success, being named a metro area super lawyer every year since 2013 and one of America's top 100 attorneys. His practice covers a wide range of cases, including catastrophic injury, medical malpractice, motor vehicle accidents, and traumatic brain injuries. Mr. Ricigliano's he views trial practice as a craft, utilizing innovative storytelling methods to advocate for his clients. In addition to his legal work, he is involved in various pro bono activities and is an active member of several legal and community organizations. So that was a mouthful. It always is, and it never even scratches the surface. So my very first question, William, to you is just simply this: what did I miss?
I would say my practice, my personal practice is geared very much toward traumatic brain injury. I started doing traumatic brain injury at this point probably 15 years ago, and I would say traumatic brain injury and those clients represent about 70 to 75% of my practice.
That's really that's fascinating. And there's lots of different ways that TBI or traumatic brain injury can come about. Obviously, we're going to dive into some of that in a little bit here. But that kind of dovetails into my very next question, which is just this: give me the pitch for your firm. Why do people choose to work with RF Injury Law? Why do people choose you? Who comes and finds you? How do they find you? And yeah, give me your pitch.
Well, one of the catchphrases that we have is trust the results. And those two words, I think, are what everyone's looking for in a firm, but especially in a personal injury firm. You want to be able to trust the lawyer who's handling your case, that he or she is going to devote the time and the energy and the resources to trying to get you the second part of that, which is a result, the best result. That's essentially what we're here for. We have clients who have suffered, in many cases, the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And they're very vulnerable and they really come to us and they are trusting us. There's a lot of personal injury firms out there, but they're trusting us with their case, with their lives, with the lives of their family. And we take that very, very serious here. And they want us to get them a result. They want us to be able to make sure that they are protected. If they can't go back to work, if they can't pay their medical bills, their future is now compromised. They want results that is going to protect them and their future from this terrible event that's going to happen, that's happened to them. So that's what I would say is the two most important things: trust and getting the proper results for the clients.
Trust and results. I like that. Nice and simple, pithy, easy to remember. As somebody that does marketing on the side, I always appreciate a good slogan that just like gets to the core and is short, pithy, and memorable, which is great. So let me ask you this: what got you into law? Were you the type of person that just always knew that law was your end goal? You grew up watching Perry Mason reruns and you knew this was your thing, or did you kind of stumble into this accidentally? I saw you have a poli sci degree. Did you go into poli sci thinking that you would wind up doing law, or what led you into law, and then what led you into PI law in particular?
I had a social studies teacher in high school that I was particularly close with, and I would spend a lot of time in his office, and we would talk about a lot of different things. And one of the times that I was in his office, he said to me, "Have you considered law as a profession?" He said, I think it's something you'd be interested in, you'd be good at. Maybe it's something that you want to explore." And at that point, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But I do remember him saying that I was always I always did very well in his class and in English. I wrote well, and I thought it might be something that I would be interested in potentially. When I went to college, I started to take some law classes. I took a constitutional law class, I took a criminal law class, and started to get a flavor for what it was about. And I found that I was interested in it. The other part of it is, and the reason I probably went into personal injury is I love stories. And I really felt that a trial lawyer, at the end of the day, what we're doing is telling stories about what's happened to our clients. And we're suggesting or recommending the end to that story. So that kind of fascinated me too, because I thought, if I can take these human stories and verbalize them, I thought it would be something that I would be interested in and that I could do. And so I took an internship while I was in college with a law firm. that was really interesting. And at that point, I sort of decided that it was what I wanted to do. And then subsequently went to law school, and that's kind of how it all sort of started.
Gotcha. And so as of last year, you crossed the 30-year mark. If I'm doing my math correctly, I've got my degrees in philosophy and history, so
Yes.
math isn't my strong suit, but so 94 in New Jersey, 95 in New York, so you're crossing the 30-year mark in New York this year, 30-year mark last year in New Jersey. That is awesome. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations on that. It sounds like you've got a wealth of experience behind you. I'm curious, and I ask this a lot of my clients. Obviously, at this point, the pandemic is hopefully far behind us, and hopefully we don't see anything like that again. But I speak with attorneys all over the United States and even internationally, and it's always fascinating to me to see the different experiences everyone had. And you've got your feet, one foot in New York, one foot in New Jersey, which are both, a little bit more on the I don't know. I want to be careful how I say this because I try to keep politics out of what I say, but I think they were more cautious, more reactionary to the pandemic than some other places may have been. So I'm curious what your experience of the pandemic was, again, straddling New York and New Jersey. Um, did it affect your law firm at all? Did you guys see a spike in traffic? Did you see a drop in traffic? Did it affect the way that you zoomed into court? What changed?
It was scary because as plaintiff personal injury attorneys, we only earn a fee when we settle the case or take the case to trial. And at the end of the day, this is still a business. And if you're not in court and you're not moving your cases and you're not resolving them, then you're not earning a living. And we also try to bring cases into the office, and people were not getting out and about, and we saw a real severe decline in the number of cases that we were bringing in. So initially, it was very worrisome. And what we decided to do, we sort of banded together and said, okay, let's figure out ways to pivot, or let's figure out the best way to get through this. Because I knew if we just got through it, eventually things were going to change. And there would be an increase in the number of cases that we brought in. And I knew that eventually the courts would reopen. And so what we tried to do was we tried to focus on the cases that we knew a year ahead of time, once hopefully the pandemic had resolved, those cases would hopefully be back into the court system. And we kind of focused on our energy on that, so that once the courts opened up and we started to go back to business as usual, we kind of had a plan in place. It was also interesting for us because we opened our New Jersey office, or we're starting to build our New Jersey office right around the time of the pandemic. And so that was a little bit of a setback because we had anticipated getting a lot of new business, and now no one was really out and about. So once that office opened, though, things started to pick up, and eventually we were able to get back on track. But it was really just sticking together and making sure that we would be ready once the pandemic came to a close. And fortunately for us, we were, and then we got very, very busy once again.
Gotcha. Now, I noticed you guys, I mentioned this in the pre-roll as well, but you guys have the Lawmobile. Did that come about because of the pandemic, because people couldn't come out and see you? Was that already going on before the pandemic, or is that something that kind of came out after the fact?
No, it's a good question. It actually came about as a result of the pandemic. We had a satellite office in the Bronx, and the neighborhood during the time of the pandemic had changed. And there was no reason for that office anymore because people were just not coming to it.
Mhm.
So we knew that we wanted to be able to still have that satellite office. Was very successful for us because we were actually in a neighborhood. We got to know the people in the neighborhood. They got to know us. People would come in the office all the time, ask all kinds of legal questions. It was really a great experience. But we realized with the pandemic, we were not going to be able to maintain that office. And so one day I started to think about that. How can we do this in a different way? And not only that, how can we maybe go out and service other communities, or communities other than the one that we had the satellite office in? And so we came up with this concept of having a law office on wheels. And we found a designer who could design the office for us. And sure enough, we built a moving office, a mobile office. It's literally an office with a conference room and telecommunication capabilities. And we took it out on the road, and we were able to go to various neighborhoods in both New York and New Jersey and meet additional people and find additional clients. And it was useful because people at that point had gotten away from coming into offices. They were somewhat reluctant to leave their homes. So we kind of brought the office to them. And even now, as you mentioned, we're many years post-pandemic, but we don't really have a lot of clients that come to the office. Everything now is really done over Zoom, teleconferencing. And so the idea of bringing the office to the client rather than the client coming to the office really, I think, was a good idea, and sort of, yes, was born out of the pandemic because of people's reluctance to move around during that period of time, which seems like a long time now, but it wasn't really all that long ago.
It's funny because it's both a long time ago and a short time ago. It's a half a
Yeah,
decade. A half a decade is a
yeah,
long time. It's 2000
yeah.
was we're already in 2025 at this point, but it was just 5 years ago. Like a half a decade is simultaneously a really long time and not a long time at all. It's a really weird time frame to be talking about. But again, hopefully nothing like that ever happens again. Knock on wood. I don't
I
have any
hope
wood
not.
around me, unfortunately, but
Yeah, I hope not.
so let me ask you this. Now, you've been practicing law for 30 years now, very successfully, and uh, as they say, you go up to bat enough, you don't bat 1,000, right? It's easy to bat 1,000 if you've only swung a couple times, but you bat enough times, you're going to strike out. And I'm sure in your experience, your practice of law, William, you've probably had a couple of setbacks, things you would consider to be a failure. But of course, I'm a firm believer that it's only a failure if you don't learn from it, right? And if you learn from it, it's a slow burn win. It still hurts in the time, obviously, but I'm sure you've had one or two setbacks or moments that you consider a failure. Can you let my listeners know about maybe one of those times, but what you learned from it also, and how you carry that forward to make sure you're always bringing your A game, so to speak?
Well, the first case I ever tried, I lost, and I lost pretty miserably. And it was pretty devastating to me at the time. In fact, it still is all these years later. I did everything wrong. I picked the wrong jury. Uh, I prepared hard, but I put the wrong witnesses on. I made a lot of mistakes. And I really analyzed it afterwards because I was surprised that it didn't go the way that I had anticipated. And I very quickly realized that I didn't know enough about how to put on a case properly. And so I spent a lot of time talking to other lawyers that were more experienced than me and being honest with the mistakes I made. I went to a lot of different seminars to try to understand how to successfully present a case and not just present it, but win it. And when I look back now, I realize all of the mistakes that I made, the errors. But at the time, and it was mostly for lack of experience, I just didn't know. And so I think that experience taught me, if I had had early success right out of the gate, I think maybe I would have done things that way my whole career. Every time that I've had a setback, I always go back to the drawing board. And even if I have a win, I'm always open to retooling and doing things differently because juries change, the business changes, the way people perceive personal injury and the clients, that changes. Judges change. All of it's very fluid, and you have to be willing to adapt and modify and take on new challenges and do things in different ways. And I think that initial setback taught me to do that, not just for that case, but throughout the remainder of my career. And I continue to do that. If I go to a seminar and someone's doing something that is working, but very different than the way I do things, I may try that or I may incorporate that into my repertoire. There's been a couple of times during my career where I've completely changed the way that I try cases. And it's hard. You want to go back to the old way because learning a new way can be difficult. It's like learning a new golf swing. Uh, you know that in the long run it'll help. When you're first doing it, you're not comfortable with it. But I've forced myself to do it because I've seen that if you're willing to change and take on different challenges and do things in different ways, it's better for the clients in the long run, and you're probably going to get better results. And I think that I learned that right from the get-go, not having early success. So I think that was a good lesson for me.
So, it's funny because I was going to ask you that exact question: is if you would have won that first one, would it have changed your trajectory? And it sounds like the answer is likely. And again, I'm a firm
Yeah.
believer that sometimes failure is the best teacher, right? I mean, it really is. And so having that a moment of humbling early on. What do you do when that happens, though? Like, did you help the client to go into an appeal? Is there an appeal process? Are there specific laws in place that would prevent that from happening? How did you help that client moving forward, or was it possible?
So my job and our job as lawyers is to give clients options. At the end of the day, the decision is theirs to make. Now I'm lucky because I most of my clients will say to me, I trust you, what do you think? But really it's their decision. So you sit down with the client and you say, here are the options. I think perhaps there are appealable issues. You should, or you may think about filing an appeal. There's no guarantees that you're going to get a new trial, but you weigh the options with them and you go through them all, and then you let them make the decision about what to do. And sometimes you file the appeal, you could lose that appeal, uh, and you're right back at the starting gate. Or, and this has happened to me too, you file the appeal, the case is overturned, you go back and you retry the case again, which has happened to me on a couple of occasions. So it's all about giving the clients options. I think most clients, if they see that you have prepared and you've done everything you can to prevail, I think most clients can live with the result. Some can't, some will be bitter about the result nonetheless. Uh, but I think most clients, what they want more than anything else is a strong effort from you and handling their case in a professional manner and giving everything you can. Fortunately for me, I've had far more success than losses, so usually it's not an issue. Usually the clients are very happy. They get the result they want, and it feels good to be able to deliver that. But in the event that it doesn't happen, you just have to give them their options moving forward. And I think all of the clients that I've represented over the years will all agree, especially when it comes to trials, that I put 150% into every case I try. Doesn't matter whether I consider it a small case, a big case, or something in between. I give it everything I have, and I think that most clients understand that and can accept the decision. Because at the end of the day, the decisions are made by the jury. I can only present the case in the best light possible.
Yeah.
It's the jury that decides, and that's one of the very humbling things about what we do. I have no control over what a jury is going to do, which is why most of these cases settle, because it's a risk to go to trial. You honestly really never know what a jury is going to do. And I think most clients know that going in, and you try to explain that to them when the process starts.
I'm always curious, have you ever had the chance to sit in on a jury? Have you been called up and done your civic duty, or have you been called up and dismissed, or you just have never had your name pulled?
I would love to sit on a jury. I think it'd be fascinating to see that process from a different perspective. We as attorneys are not exempt from jury duty. We have to do it. I tell people all the time, the only civil duties that we're required to fulfill are jury duty and the draft, if there's a draft. That's really it. Uh, and as trial lawyers, we understand that most people view it as an inconvenience. But I also think that once people make the decision or understand that they're on a jury, my experience has been that most jurors take the job seriously. So I have gone for jury duty and I'm routinely dismissed because obviously of what I do for a living. So I have not yet sat on a jury, but I would love that opportunity. I think it'd be a great lesson to see what it's like to actually sit on a jury, deliberate, watch other lawyers present their case. I think it would be fascinating.
Gotcha. I've always thought it was interesting that, if you're going to be presenting in front of a jury, it would be desirous to be able to do that. Do you guys do mock trials or test trials or anything like that? focus groups or anything? Have you ever sat in even on that side of the jury just to see how they're understanding those kinds of arguments?
I recently had a very lengthy trial and we hired a juror consultant and we ran focus groups and spent a lot of time trying to develop the case. And that was really fascinating. You know, trying trials are in general are about psychology and framing the issues and trying to understand how people make decisions and perceive things. And yeah, it was really fascinating to run the facts of the case by these focus groups and see how they responded to our fact scenario. And I really think that it opened my eyes to a lot of things that I would not have anticipated or seen or even thought about had we not done it. And the other thing that was really amazing about that experience was I knew what jurors were going to find important and what they were not going to find important. And so I was very relaxed during the trial because the things I knew were not going to be important, I just didn't worry about. Whereas, had I not run the focus groups or not had the consultant, I probably would have tried to worry about everything. How do we resolve this? And what about this? And what if they think about this? And I was able to just focus in on the most important things. And when the other stuff came up, I just didn't worry about it. And that was a new experience and it was a good one for me because I like to cover all bases and to be able to just focus your energy on what was most important was a great, great lesson.
That makes perfect sense. So let's go back. We were talking about your biggest failure, but obviously the flip side of that coin is your biggest success. I am sure that you've had a few moments in your legal career, William, where you're just proud. You're falling asleep at night, and like the last thing that goes through your head is, "Oh yeah, that worked out so great. I can't believe we knocked that one out of the park." Or maybe it was something you really thought you were going to lose, and then all of a sudden the jury comes back and not only sides with you, but gives you did two, three, four, five times what you asked for or whatnot. Maybe it was just helping someone put their lives together. But what are one or two of the things in your practice of law that you're most proud of? You would consider some of your biggest wins?
Well, there's been quite a few of them. I'll give you a couple. The one was the first traumatic brain injury case I ever tried. A colleague of mine asked me to try the case for him. I didn't know anything about traumatic brain injury, but I figured let me try to figure it out. And I got the file and I had 2 months to prepare. And I spent 1 month reviewing the file. And I mean, I just took it apart. I mean, I read all the transcripts, I looked at all the medical records. I really got to know the file. And then the other month I spent trying to learn about traumatic injury, brain injury, and how to properly present a traumatic brain injury case. And I remember I made a list of 100 questions, things that I just thought of and I was curious about. And I remember saying to myself, I have to answer these 100 questions if I want to prevail in this case, because if I have these questions, the jury is going to have these questions also. And I met with experts and I did research and I read a lot. And sure enough, I started to check off all of these questions. And I remember about a week before the trial started, there was one last question that I hadn't figured out yet. And I finally figured out the answer to that. And we went into trial. I tried the case in front of probably the best judge I've ever tried a case in front of. He was a great judge, very decisive, very smart, let us try our case, didn't interfere. It was a real pleasure to try the case in front of him. But he said to us, I'm just letting you guys know this is never going to be $1 million case. Never. So he said, you do your dog and pony show and you do what you're doing. But at the end of the day, you're never getting $1 million in this case. And we got a verdict, and the verdict was $3.7 million. And I remember saying to the judge brought us in the back, and I probably wouldn't say this now, but at the time I said to the judge, Judge, you were right. This wasn't $1 million case. It was actually a $3.7 million case. To which he chuckled and he laughed and he congratulated us. So that was a great experience because we got the result, but it was just a great experience for me. I was fascinated by traumatic brain injury. And that really was when I began to go to seminars and read even more and develop this real passion for representing people who had traumatic brain injury. It was a great experience for me and really changed the course of my practice and my profession. The other really great story that was meaningful to me is I represented a client a few years ago who was pretty debilitated. So much so that we never had any of our meetings in my office. All of the meetings were at his home. This is way before COVID because he really wasn't able to get out and about and come to my office. So every single meeting I had with him, and we would meet on at least a monthly basis, maybe even more so. It was very, very frequent. It would be at his home. And I would go to his home and his whole family and he would sit down to dinner. We'd all have dinner together. And then he and I would go into another room and we would discuss the case, what's coming up, what's happening. I would update him. And I would then leave and he would walk me to the door. And this was someone who had to use crutches, could not get around without the use of crutches. So he kind of hobbled his way, getting me to the door. And right before I would leave, every single time I met with him, he would say to me, you know, my life is in your hands. And I took that very, very seriously because I knew what his family was going through. I knew what his wife was going through. I knew what he was going through. And the family had been really affected by what had happened to him. And when he would say those things, I took the responsibility incredibly seriously. And we tried that case for 3 weeks and we settled the case and we did very, very well. It was a great settlement and actually really protected him and his family and in many ways changed his life. And I remember a few weeks after we resolved the case, I went to go see him and he was with a group of friends of his. And when he introduced me to them, he didn't introduce me as this is Bill, or this is my lawyer, or this is my friend even. He said, I want you to meet Bill. He's my brother. And we've maintained a very, very close relationship, even to this day. And to be able to have that responsibility and then come through, knowing what his family went through, and now all these years later, seeing him doing well and his family doing well and thriving, it's one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me in my career. And it's one of the reasons I think you go into this profession to get those kind of results for your clients. So those two stories really, I've had a lot of them, fortunately, but those two really stand out.
Awesome. I mean, to be able to make that level of a connection with somebody, and I've always respected PI law. I mean, you guys get a bad rap, the
Yeah.
ambulance chasers and whatnot,
Yeah.
obviously, but like you fill a real need in society. You help the people that are literally the most downtrodden at the lowest point sometimes in their lives, and you guys do it on your own dime, functionally. We're gonna go to bat for you. It's entirely on us to win this. I mean, you get a percentage, obviously, if you win, like, that's totally fine, but they don't put up any money. I mean, the average hourly price for a lawyer across the country is 500 an hour. You're in New Jersey and New York. I imagine it is not even a blink of an eye for some of the attorneys there to be charging $1,000 to $1,500 an hour, like in all honesty. And for you guys to just front it, and sometimes you lose. You spend all the money and the time and everything, and you go in there and you still lose. You guys are out, but the client didn't lose anything in the process. Like I've always respected that model. I think it's a very unique model, and it also aligns your interest with the clients because you want to get a settlement for them. You want to get the biggest possible settlement because the more that you get
Right.
in total, yeah, the more you make. But it encourages you to really go to bat for your client. I think that's such a neat concept. I've always liked that.
Yeah, and if I could say something about that, Justin,
Yeah, please do.
it is unfortunate that personal injury attorneys do get a bad rap. I've been to cocktail parties and I've heard all the jokes and people call me an ambulance chaser and I always joke back and say, well, I'm actually an ambulance catcher because if all I did was chase them, I wouldn't be able to represent anybody. But, and I understand the reason for the reputation. There's a lot of incompetence in this business and there's a lot of fraud and that's what people see. But one of the things that I've always been very proud of is I have always believed that you can elevate yourself above that. At the end of the day, we're trial lawyers, and to be a really good trial lawyer takes an incredible amount of work, and you have to know the law, evidence, you have to be able to make arguments on your feet. There's a lot of skills that go into it. And I think that maybe people don't quite get that when they think of personal injury attorneys. When someone gives me a hard time about being a personal injury attorney, I'll say to them, do you actually know what I do? And they usually don't. And when I begin to tell them what I do, the time that I spend, uh, the sacrifices that you have to make, the hours that I work to try to help my clients, you can see that they respect that and understand that maybe they had a misperception. One of the things I loved about traumatic brain injury is the first traumatic brain injury conference I went to, the attorneys there were, I mean, these are the best attorneys in the country. I was in awe. Their level of experience and knowledge and commitment to their clients. And I remember saying, this is the type of lawyer that I want to be. I want to be like these men and women who are representing these clients, because they were the cream of the crop. And it was interesting because a couple of years ago, I actually spoke I was asked to speak at that same conference, and it was a great honor for me because I always wanted to be included in that group of great lawyers. And there's good lawyers and not so great lawyers, and every profession has its bad apples, so to speak. But I've always considered myself, and I surround myself with other lawyers who really do care about the craft of what we do and really do care about our clients. And I think when people give me a hard time, I don't get upset or defensive. I just try to explain to them what I actually do to try to get them to understand that the perception of lawyers who do this kind of work is very different from reality when you're talking to lawyers who really put the time and effort in. Because if you're going to do this job well, you have to spend a lot of time. You have to get to know the medicine. You have to work with experts. You have to know the law. There's a lot that goes into it. But if you love it and you're motivated to help your clients, you're going to spend that time and effort to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to talk more about TBI here in a minute, but I got a really important question for you first. Do you
Sure.
have a favorite lawyer joke?
Do I have a favorite lawyer joke? Yeah. What do you call 1,000 lawyers chained to the bottom of the ocean?
Good start.
Good start. Or why do sharks circle and not attack personal injury lawyers?
I don't know why. I don't know if I know that one.
Professional courtesy. So yeah, those
What's black and brown looks really good on a lawyer? A Doberman.
oh, I haven't heard that one. That's a good one.
I used to collect
Yeah.
lawyer jokes. I work with a lot of attorneys in my line of work, so and I interview a lot of attorneys. So having a handful of attorney jokes on standby is always a good thing. And it's something really important about having a healthy sense of a self-deprecating sense of humor, right? I mean, to be able to have a little bit of levity in what you do is important. But again, I have those only because I think they're funny, but I don't think they're accurate. I think that attorneys like yourself really do fill an accurate or an accurate a an important role in society. Here's one more.
I
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I also think it's important to point this out. I think you have to look at it and understand that it's funny the lecture that I gave that I was telling you about,
Mhm.
the way we as lawyers perceive ourselves is, Atticus Finch,
Yeah,
Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird. But the way the public perceives us is like Better Call Saul. It told two totally different perspectives. And I think what's important is once you acknowledge that and say, okay, this is the perception, then you begin to understand why. And the number one, I ask people, what is it about lawyers that you don't like? My father was not crazy about lawyers. And by and large, what people don't like is lawyers don't call them back. They call, they want to be updated, they want to know what's going on, and the lawyers don't bother to call them back. And I think that when you understand what the perceptions are, the negative perceptions, and then you switch your model or way of doing things to eliminate those perceptions, I think that's a good thing. So I think it's healthy to be aware of the negative implications and then do the opposite so that your clients are satisfied with the work you're doing and the results that you're getting.
gotcha. No, I'd agree with that 100%. I think that's a really good way to frame it. Before we dive into TBI, I'm curious. One more kind of a side but funny question. And I said this in the pre-roll as well. Attorneys, I find, especially in PI, you guys deal with a lot of absurdities. Like you just do. Sometimes it's the cases people bring where they think they have a case and they don't. Maybe it's again something that a witness says on the stand, or something the opposing side does. Whatever it happens to be. What's maybe one of the most absurd things you've encountered in your practice of law, William?
Um, Again, there's quite a few things I can think of. Uh, I represented a client who, let's put it to you this way, his orthopedic surgeon testified that he was the worst patient he ever had. Uh, he wasn't very likable. And I had a hard time handling the case because he was difficult and he was not warm and fuzzy. So I tried the case. I got a plaintiff's verdict, and the verdict had to be set aside. So I had to try this case with this difficult client again, which, if you have to retry a case, it's a miserable experience. You put all this time and effort into a case, you get a verdict for whatever reason, and in this case, it was what they call an inconsistent verdict. You now have to retry the whole thing all over again with a client that is tough to represent. But his case was meritorious. He had a meritorious case. And the second time that I tried the case, I remember his cell phone went off 3 times during my opening. I remember he fell asleep at the table, counsel table. So I sensed from the jury that they didn't like him. But I also knew that we had proven the case. And the night before I did my summation, I was struggling to try and think about, well, how do I reconcile these two different things? And I said to the judge, because the defendant does the summation first and plaintiff goes, I said to the judge, after the defendant has done his summation, can we have a sidebar? Because I might make a request. So defendant did his summation, the judge brings us up at sidebar. And he said, what's your request? I said, can you please send the jury out? I'm going to ask my client to sit outside the courtroom. I don't want him to be here for my summation. And just said, sure. So he sent the jury out. Client sat out in the hall. I said to the client, listen, I want you to sit out in the hall. There's some things that I have to say to the jury that I don't think you should be here for. And he did. And I got up in front of the jury. And the first thing I said is, I know my client's not likable. I don't particularly care for him. And I'm sure that some of you, maybe all of you, don't care for him either. But this is not a popularity contest. And you don't decide cases based upon whether you like someone or you don't. You base cases on your oath to follow the law, the evidence that the judge instructs you on. And when you do that, he wins this case. He has proven this case. He should prevail. So I have to do my job regardless of how I feel about him, and you have to do your job too. And you took an oath not to decide this case based upon whether you like him or not. It's based upon the facts, the evidence, the law. And sure enough, they came back and I got a verdict 3 times what the prior verdict was. And I do think that was it was an odd thing to come up with, but I think under the circumstances that was necessary. And to the jury's credit, I do think that it was hard for them to put it aside, but they did do it. They put aside their feelings for him and did decide the case appropriately. So that one really comes to mind. It was an interesting, unusual situation that fortunately worked out for the best.
I have to know. I have to ask this question. After the verdict came in, it's 3 times larger. Everyone's feeling good about it. Did you eventually tell your client what you told the jury, or did you just kind of let it go? Did he care?
I did tell him uh, in a very gentle way, and he appreciated it. He said, "I understand," and he goes, "Obviously, it was a smart thing to do." And he said, I appreciate you, not having me in the room when you said those things. And I told him, I said, look, I just felt that the jury was feeling that way. You could feel it in the room. And that's the interesting about trials too. Sometimes you feel things in the room and you have to be aware of that. I see attorneys who just miss that. I had a case that it was a wrongful death case. Again, another case that I had to retry. And on the second trial, there was a witness that the defendant put on the stand. And it was a very, very sad case. And I remember the jury feeling this palpable sadness in the room. You could just feel it. The jury was sad. They were feeling bad about what happened. It was a tragedy. And I had a whole list of questions that I was going to ask. And I just knew it was not necessary. I said to myself, I actually think that they've already decided. And I think that they've decided in our favor because of just the overall feeling. And I got up and I asked that witness one question. I said, I only have one question for you. And I asked one question and I sat down. And that jury went out, and after 20 minutes, which is not a long period of time, came back and gave us a plaintiff's verdict. So sometimes you just got to know the room and you got to go with your gut, and you have to just try things that are unorthodox. And sometimes that's the best way to do it.
The longest you've ever had to wait for a jury to come back?
I try. So in New York, some of the counties here do what's called a bifurcated trial. You have liability or who's at fault, and then you have damages, the injuries. And in New Jersey, for example, you try all those issues together. Some of the counties in New York, you try them separately. You try liability first, and then damages secondly. So I tried a case, and we tried only liability first. Who was at fault for in this case, it was a car crash. And that jury was out for a week on just liability. I couldn't believe it. That's the longest I think I've ever had a jury out ever. And it was only on the question of liability. That was intense. We went there every day, waiting, waiting, waiting. And after a week, they finally came to a result. So that's probably the longest.
You take up smoking during that time.
Yeah, I mean, you pace and you're nervous.
Wear a hole through the ground.
Yeah, when they come back and say the jury's has a verdict and you walk in that room, I mean, your heart is just pounding and racing, and you're scared to death, and but when you get a good result, there's no better feeling.
Awesome. That's awesome. So let's jump over and talk about TBI for a little bit. Traumatic
Sure.
brain injuries. I know that they can be incredibly challenging to prove in court. Is there a particular strategy that you use to effectively present the severity of a TBI to the jury? And given that they oftentimes have TBIs have long-term ramifications, long-term effects, long-term damages, how do you approach calculating and ensuring that your clients get the adequate care that they're going to need, both immediately and long term?
Yeah, I think you have to understand that the injury is internal. You can't see it. And I think it starts in jury selection. If you're for example, in New York, we're able to voir dire or question the jurors, and you want to try to get them to start thinking about invisible injuries, injuries you can't see, but nonetheless people have. Uh, somebody might have a hearing loss or be deaf. You don't necessarily know that until maybe you start to speak to them, but nonetheless, it's a disability. So it kind of starts there. But what you want to do is educate the jury with your experts about how a brain injury is caused. And then anatomically, once the injury happens, what is that going to look like externally? It's subtle. There are things that you'll see or that the person will experience or behavior that the person will take on when they have a brain injury. So the first part is, how does this happen? What occurs anatomically? And then you have to, and this is really where the challenge is, how do you show the jury that the brain injury is manifesting itself in some way? The reason that's so difficult is because the person who's been injured, in most cases, is not very good at describing the issues they're having. Very, very often they're behavioral issues, they're emotional issues. A lot of people will say that the person they knew before is gone and there's this new person here. And for someone who's going through that, it's almost impossible for them to describe that. So the best thing to do is try and find as many people in that person's life who knew them before the injury and then who knew them after, and describe for the jury the changes that they've observed. And if those people are credible and believable, and hopefully they are, and are good at describing those changes, I think the jury starts to get a flavor of that. Obviously, spouses, parents, but sometimes it's the individuals that we see on a regular basis who aren't related to us or who aren't our friends. You know, I've seen dry cleaners and hairstylists and coaches and people that my clients interact with who maybe aren't related or friends. They've noticed changes too, and those are the most effective witnesses because they have no axe to grind. And they'll come in and they'll explain exactly what they've seen in the client's behavior, what's happened to them emotionally. Now, some traumatic brain injury cases are pretty obvious. You clearly have clients that have a devastating head injury, but the majority of my clients don't have that. Their brain injuries are very, very subtle, and you have to bring all these tools in to educate the jury. But you also have to find people who are willing to be open-minded enough to listen to it and understand how a brain injury occurs and then how it shows up in someone's behavior or cognition or those kind of things.
You How do you suss out that, hey, one of the guys we need to have on the stand is the dry cleaner? Like, how do you get to that level of detail where you're like, you know, who's really going to notice my client's uh difficulty, his differences from before and after is going to be the dry cleaner, the delicatessen guy, you know, whoever it happens to be. How do you get to that level of understanding their life and their pattern and realizing, hey, this is somebody that would be a good, credible witness?
Well, that's what makes traumatic brain injury cases so interesting. You have to go and really get to know your client. You have to see where they live. You have to see what they do on a daily basis. So the dry cleaner example wasn't mine. It was actually a colleague. He represented someone who had a traumatic brain injury, and he went to the home and he's, you know, we need to find people who knew you before and after. And it was the usual list of suspects, family members, friends, those kind of things. And he said, well, is there anyone that you deal with on a regular basis that's not related to you and is not your friend? Someone you see once a week, twice a week, once a month. And the wife said, what about the dry cleaner? So the attorney went to the dry cleaner, and by the way, his client was a Wall Street guy, and he said, "Did you know my client before the incident?" Yes. And have you noticed changes? And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, can you describe it for me?" He said, "Sure. Before the incident, your client would come in. He would give me stock tips. We'd talk about the market. He would tell me how to invest my money. Since the incident, he comes in here." And there's days he can't even make proper change. And so that's a very dramatic explanation from someone who sees the person on a regular basis. Another colleague of mine um, went to someone's home, and the lawn and the outside of the home was in shambles. The lawn was overgrown and weeds and just wasn't a very nice exterior. And when he went into the home, he saw some pictures that they had of the home, and it was meticulous. The grass was beautiful and really great landscaping. And he said to his client's spouse, who did the lawn? She said, my husband did. And he found out that he wasn't capable, he would do all the landscaping and the work, and he just wasn't capable from a cognitive basis to do it anymore. So you have to get in there and ask questions and find out and talk to people. And that's how you find these witnesses that can prove the case for you. Because these are just regular people who come in and just talk about the differences that they've observed.
You said that TBI is 70 or so percent of what you guys focus on. What are the leading causes of traumatic brain injury? Is it mostly car accidents? Is it, I mean, obviously slip and falls can do it. A while back, I was walking with my daughter, who's my college age, and she's boom in the ice. We didn't see a patch, slipped, fell, and it's like bashed her head. Fortunately, she was fine. But like, I mean, I know there's so many ways it could happen, but I have to imagine you get a feel for some of the most common, hey, here's somebody coming to me with a TBI. How did it happen? Car accident. Here's somebody coming to me with a TBI. How did it happen? Car accident. Is it mostly car accidents? Are there hidden things that most people wouldn't think about that ultimately result in TBIs?
I would say the three most common are yes, motor vehicle collisions, things falling on people's heads. That happens quite a bit, and slip and falls where they strike their head. But a traumatic brain injury occurs when there's rotational forces, external forces applied to the brain and the skull. Because what happens is your brain is not stationary; it moves inside your head, your skull. So anything that causes your brain to move and twist and rotate, any kind of incident that causes that can lead to a traumatic brain injury. One of the most common things that cause a TBI is airbag deployment. Uh, you get hit in the face with an airbag, it's a pretty decent blow, and your head and your skull and your brain are going to move. Even the blast from an airbag can cause a traumatic brain injury. So it really runs the gamut. What we do is we screen every single person who comes to our office for an intake. We screen every single one for the symptoms of a traumatic brain injury. We have a list of symptoms and we go through it. And if they have 7 or more of those symptoms, we at the very least have them go and investigate whether or not they have a traumatic brain injury, because TBI is very frequently either misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. I've had clients come into my office in tears, and I'll tell them, I think you have a traumatic brain injury. And they'll say to me, you're the first person who told me I wasn't crazy. Because some medical personnel don't even know what it is that they're experiencing. So it runs the gamut, which is why we screen everybody for a potential traumatic brain injury. And more times than not, that's what they end up having.
Somebody, and I don't know if you can answer this fully or not, but after somebody's suffered a traumatic brain injury, is that the type of thing that more often than not, what percentage of people eventually get better? What percentage of people basically stay the same? And what percentage of people degrade over time? And is there a way for you to even see that coming? Like when you're
Yes.
presenting to the jury, like, hey, he used to be at 100%, he's now at a 70%, and he's probably going to be at a 40% in 10 years. Like, how do you determine that?
So to answer your first question, if someone hasn't recovered from a traumatic brain injury after 6 months, they're probably going to have long-term issues. The other, the most significant factor for long-term issues with a traumatic brain injury are clients who say that they've suffered post-traumatic amnesia. So if you have a client say, I was crossing the roadway and a car was coming toward me and I saw the headlights, and the next thing I remember, I was in the ambulance, there's a period of time that is completely gone. Those clients, by and large, almost all the time, have long-term issues with TBI. As far as whether or not people are going to continue to deteriorate, again, that's a difficult thing to try to establish to a jury. What is the future going to look like? We don't have a crystal ball. There are studies that have been run, uh, and focus groups and uh, where people have been evaluated over time. But I think really what you do as a trial lawyer is say to the jury, well, first you have to have experts say, this is my opinion that the person is going to continue to devolve, and there's anatomical reasons and biological reasons for that. There's something called a neurometabolic cascade where there's chemicals in your brain that are released with a TBI and they cause problems. So you have to actually set the stage for that through expert testimony. But my pitch to a jury, or what I always say is, if someone else caused this to an individual, and there's a chance that this individual is going to have this down the road, why should they have to settle for anything less than full, complete compensation? Meaning, if we think there's a chance, even if it's slight, that this person's going to need future medical care, aren't they entitled to that? They didn't ask for this, they didn't volunteer for this, it was caused by someone else. And it's really about convincing the jury that it's full and complete compensation, because when you go to trial, you have one chance. You can't come back 10, 20, 30 years down the road and say, oh, I'm having all these problems. You have one chance and one chance only. I think the real challenge is, and this is where kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, Justin, I think people who think about personal injury cases, they think about the money as an award or a reward. It's not. And you have to decondition people to understand. I never say to a jury, I'm asking you to award money or reward money. I always say to them, I'm asking you to include money or allow money, because that's what you're doing. It's not a reward. It's the only way our system of justice allows to protect people and compensate them for the things that they have lost. So a lot of what you have to do is just try to condition people to think that way. And it's difficult because I don't think everyone does. And I think people who come into these cases are thinking, like you'll hear jurors say, well, that person wouldn't have made that money that you're asking for if they worked, for the rest of their lives. That's not really what the money is for. And you have to sort of try and get juries to accept that, and then you have a better chance of having your client compensated fully.
Gotcha.
That
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think that's an important way to frame it. I mean, framing, you mentioned earlier, one of the things you really like is storytelling. And part of storytelling, the storytelling is framing things, very solidly. So framing it in that way, I think is a very important aspect of what you do. Um, Something else I'm curious about, and I know that I've talked with a lot of injury attorneys. I know you deal with some horrific things sometimes, and you just have to suck it up and deal with it, right? You have to look at some of the most gory and gruesome scenes out there. I mean, the only thing worse would be, I think, being a criminal attorney and you have to deal with like abuse towards a minor, and you have to look at the images or something like that. Like that would be like horrible. But you deal with accident scenes and pictures of trauma and everything else. How do you handle that kind of, I guess I'm trying to think of the word I want to use here, but just the graphic imagery, does it ever wear you down? Are you able to just compartmentalize it and put it to the side? Or how do you keep your mental calm in those moments?
I think that your job as a lawyer is to advocate for your client and also be objective. The main reason people hire attorneys is because if you're a family member and something's happened to a member of your family, you're going to be so emotionally involved in that you can't even think straight. If your son or your daughter or your wife or your husband has been involved in a horrible accident and they have really serious injuries, debilitating injuries, you're emotionally involved in that. And so you can't separate that. Our job as trial lawyers is to separate that and be compassionate, uh, be understanding of what your clients are going through. But my job is to advocate for my clients and present their case. And you can be passionate about the arguments you make. But I do think you have to be able to separate those things. I also think that the jury is expecting you to use sympathy as a means to get money. That's what they're expecting. And so I don't know that that works. I think that what you do is present those graphic details, but not overdo it. only present them in terms of the story of what your client has gone through and what they will continue to go through. So I think sometimes if you overdo it or it's too much, you can anesthetize the jury to the point where they may not care. But yeah, I mean, I've seen so many. You have the human side where you see these graphic scenes, autopsy photos and records and some really horrible things. But then the other side of you says, okay, I have to be able to tell the story in the best way possible. And that requires some objectivity, which I think is what your clients want you to do. You will get passionate. You will get upset. You'll advocate very, very hard for your client, but at the end of the day, you have to be somewhat objective about the case too. And that means knowing some of the pitfalls of your case too, because not every case is perfect. And if you focus only in on the sad, gory aspects of the case, you lose focus in terms of the other things that you have to be concerned about.
Have you ever, that's an interesting way to phrase it, and I'm curious about this. You said not every case is perfect. Are there some cases that just are perfect, or related to that? Have you ever had a case that you're like, this is a perfect case, and then it doesn't go your way?
There are no perfect cases. There are problems in every case.
Okay.
If there's a perfect case out there, I mean, look, if you have a perfect case, it's probably not going to see the inside of the courtroom. Whoever's on the other side is going to probably resolve that
They'll
case.
settle that one quickly. That would make
Yeah,
sense.
but there are no perfect cases. There's always something, and there's always a way for them to defend the case, and they will defend it in whatever way they can. So, uh, there's just no such thing as a perfect case, and that's what makes it hard too. Um, your clients sometimes do things that are not very smart, or they say things that aren't true, or they have something in their history that the defendants are going to rely on or use against them. Uh, that happens in every case. So no, there aren't a perfect case. I wish there were, but there are not.
Enough. No, fair enough. You said the phrase, and I think it was just as you're talking, a stream of conscious. I totally get it. I was like, I wonder. I'll poke on that one for a minute. Well, let me go back to humanizing the attorney, which is really the point of this podcast. Anyway, you do a lot of pro bono stuff. I know you work with St. Jude's, City Meals on Wheels, etc. Tell me about some of your pro bono activities. Tell me about your community involvement. How do you balance serving your clients with giving back to the community, and what aspects of giving back to the community are most important to you?
So we've gotten most involved in the neighborhoods that have supported our offices. Like I said, we used to have a satellite office in the Bronx. We currently have an office in West New York, New Jersey. And these neighborhoods really kind of wrap their arms around you, and they promote you. The clients will come in, they refer other clients to us. You get to know the clients, you get to know the other people in the neighborhood. I'm talking to you right now from my office in Manhattan. We're in a large building where you don't get to see people on the street. But these satellite offices, they're storefronts, and you really get to know the community. And that's been really, really a unique opportunity to get to know the community, to give back to them because they've been so supportive to us. You're right. There are other charitable organizations that I am involved in, and that's great too. But I think the thing that we've been most grateful for is the opportunity to give back to these neighborhoods that have been good to us. Some of these are lower socioeconomic neighborhoods. I remember we had every year we usually do something around Christmas, and I remember one year we had a Christmas event at the Bronx office, and we gave toys to the kids. We had a Santa Claus there. It was fun. There'd be a line out the door and around the block. And I remember one woman came up to me and she pulled me aside and she was in tears. And she said, I just want to let you know that the gift you gave my daughter is probably the only gift she's going to get this year for Christmas. And she said, I just want to thank you for doing that. And, those, I mean, this happened a long time ago, and I still remember it. Those are the things that make you appreciate the neighborhood you're in, that you're serving, and it makes you remember why you kind of got into this. When I went to my first TBI conference, the first speaker got up and he said, I notice there are some new faces here. I see some old faces. He said, for those of you that are new to this, do all of us a favor. If you're not going to care about your clients, then get involved in some other area of practice. Don't do traumatic brain injury. And I know what he meant. Your traumatic brain injury clients really need a lot of time, attention, patience. They require that. And when you give that to them and they're appreciative, it's a great feeling. It's why you get into this. And to be able to give back to your communities, especially, like I said, ones that have supported you, and to get to know them, and also to break that myth that we're personal injury attorneys, we're greedy, we only care about money. I think it's a very, very rewarding thing. I can tell you that my staff, it's always their favorite time of the year. They love to do it. They love to get involved. Everyone feels good about it. And, I'm going to keep doing it as long as we can. So it's been a nice thing to be able to experience that.
Awesome. Well, William, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. I don't want to eat up your entire Monday. Um, so here in a minute, I'll probably wind down our call and I'll ask you my two closing questions. I'll give you those right now to percolate on.
Okay.
Question number one, we go back in time, you meet young Will, and you're able to give him some advice other than the obvious, which of course is buy a lot of Bitcoin and hold it till 100K, right?
Yeah.
Would you give yourself and why? And the number two is if I gave you my magic pen, and with that pen, you could add a lot of the books, strike a lot of the books, or edit a law that is on the books. And it could be a law with international ramifications or national ramifications or just functioning, focusing on New York or New Jersey. It could have the biggest sweeping implication, or it could be that stupid law that makes you fill out forms in triplicate or just getting rid of parking tickets. What law would you change and why? While you percolate on that, we're going to jump back over and take a look at your website. I am talking to William Ricigliano. I think I said that correctly.
Yeah.
I stopped practicing it while we were talking. So, over at RF Injury Law, as always, we will have a link down below to his website right at the very top of the podcast. That is rfinjurylaw.com. New York and New Jersey personal injury attorneys specializing particularly, at least William, in TBI or traumatic brain injuries. That's what we're talking about today, obviously. Our last sponsor for the day is Rank with News. Is not being in the news regularly costing your firm or your company credibility and visibility? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is more about dumb luck than science? What if there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Bloomberg, Reuters, Forbes, AP News, and others, and see those articles ranking locally, nationally, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were actually looking for, and they would come pre-sold wanting to work with you because they saw you in the news? Well, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks safely, organically, and usually permanently. It's like guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business, visit rankwith.news to learn more and to book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or your business in major national 8 and 9 figure traffic sites that can help launch you to page one in a matter of hours. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwith.news. All right, so William, you and I travel back in time and we see 30 years ago, fresh out of law school, maybe, young William Ricigliano, and you're able, without breaking the space-time continuum, to go over and just whisper maybe one or two sentences of advice into your ear. What advice are you going to give yourself?
I would just say stay calm. Everything's going to work out.
It's like that famous, the British, war poster, keep calm and keep calm and
Yeah.
carry on.
Yeah. I was so ambitious, and when I first got out of law school, things were a little tough for me, and I didn't know that it was going to work out. And I worried about that a lot. And in retrospect, it was not worth the worry. So that's the advice I would give my young self.
I think that's good advice. That's just good life advice in general too.
Yeah.
Be calm. This is good.
Yeah.
Okay, so question number two. I give you my magic pen. Now, this I'm going to give a shout out. This magic pen is from the monks in a Benedictine monastery in Atchison, Kansas. That is kansasmonks.org. But apparently, one of the priests must have blessed this pen, and it has miraculous powers. It can strike laws from the books. It can edit laws or add new laws. If I were to give you this miraculous pen, William, and let you make one change, what change are you going to make and why?
Can I give you two?
We'll see.
All right. Well, then if it's one, I would stay local. So in New York and New Jersey, when you have a wrongful death case, you're limited to what's called pecuniary loss, which means you can't recover, unlike some other states, for the value of the life that's been lost. And there's been a lot of conversation in New York about changing that law. And I really think that's something that should be changed. To be honest with you, somebody who has been wrongfully killed due to someone's negligence, that case is very often not worth nearly as much as someone who maybe was seriously injured. Because the person who's been seriously injured is still going through that, whereas the person who's deceased, obviously they don't have any future pain and suffering, as we say. So I think that if you've lost a loved one to someone else's negligence or recklessness, then you should be able to recover for the value of that life. And currently in New York and New Jersey, you can't do that. So that's probably the law that I would change.
What was the other one going to be? Just out of curiosity.
The other one was more national. We don't really have this here, and the New York bar, plaintiffs bar, is very, very strong. New Jersey too, so I don't think it'll ever happen, knock on wood, but there's this tort reform that's gone on in this country where they put caps on damages, meaning in certain states you can only recover a certain amount of money regardless of the type of injury that you have. I am totally against that. Again, if you legitimately have suffered an injury and you are going to need future medical care, or well, I should take that back. I think that the cap probably is on pain and suffering, but whatever the cap is, I don't think there should be any caps at all when it comes to recovering on a personal injury case. If the goal of tort actions and personal injury cases is to make that person whole, then there shouldn't be any cap. So I am vehemently against that. And I know that the states in which I practice, the plaintiff bar here, if that was ever something that they were going to try and do, would be vehemently opposed to it. So I would change that on some of our sister states where that currently is the rule of law.
Suspected that might have been what you were going to choose. Well, I see that the sun is about to hit you right in the face. That Manhattan setting sun is slowly. I've been watching it creep across your shoulder. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here. I do want to let you have any final last words. I always like to let my guests have the last word. Any final words of wisdom or thoughts you want to leave our listeners with, William?
Yeah, I would say that two things. One, if you have been in an accident, a slip and fall, a car crash, accident at work, it's very important that you seek legal representation right away. I know a lot of my clients say I'm not litigious, I've never done this before, and I understand that. But it's important to know your rights at the very least. And it's very important that you seek out an attorney very quickly because evidence goes away, memories fade, people change their story. So it's very, very important that you seek out legal representation right away. And the other advice that I would give, and I find this fascinating, people go for second opinions all the time. If they go to a doctor, they're not comfortable with that doctor or happy with that doctor, they'll ask another doctor. And we do this all the time with various things, but people generally tend to go to one lawyer and stay with that lawyer. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think that when you're looking for a lawyer, you should interview several lawyers and get a feel for the one that fits you best. Now, usually that's going to be a comfort thing. You want a lawyer who you feel comfortable with, that you think you can trust, that you believe has integrity. It's also very important that if you are going to pursue a personal injury action, you ask the lawyer that you're meeting with, do you try cases? A lot of lawyers, believe it or not, who do what I do not try cases. What that means is when it comes time to resolve the case, if they don't try cases, they are either going to farm your case off to some other lawyer who does that you didn't pick, or they're going to try and resolve your case for well below market value because the other side knows they don't try cases or because they just don't have the capability to do it. So my advice would be interview more than one personal injury attorney, find out their experience, find out if they try cases, and ask them, what results have you obtained with the type of injuries that I have, with the type of case that I have? Because a lot of attorneys don't have the necessary experience. So you want to make sure that you get the right attorney, get the right fit, and whether that's 2 attorneys or 3 attorneys or 10 attorneys, I recommend that people really vet the lawyer that they're going to hire, because most personal injury cases last on average 2, 3, sometimes more years. And if you're going to be with that person for that kind of significant amount of time, you want to make sure that you pick the right firm. And I would also add, probably also want to get to know or meet their staff, because very often the staff does a lot of the work behind the scenes. And if they're capable and they're confident, you'll probably have a much better experience. So protect yourself when it comes to these kind of cases. Seek legal representation and make sure you pick the right lawyer.
I think that's definitely sound advice. So thank you very much for that, William. Well, this has been the Attorney Post. As always, I am your host, Justin West. I have been chatting with attorney William Ricigliano of rfinjurylaw.com. As always, link in the description down below. As always, though we do deal with an awful lot of legal topics on this podcast does not itself constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney who focuses on the matter you need help with. Now, if you're in the New Jersey or New York area, you've got a traumatic brain injury, I think William and his law firm would be a wonderful resource for you. And again, as always, we'll have a link down below to their law firm. As far as the podcast goes, if you're watching this on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're on any of the podcast repositories, rate us, leave a comment, etc. But the single most important thing you can do is, if you know someone who would benefit from the information in this podcast, share it with them. Help them get the information they need, because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, I'm your host, Justin. Thanks for watching.